Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'm going to run you through all of the key transfer tips to help you set up your team ahead of game week 11 in FPL. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be incredibly appreciated. For now though, let's crack on with the show. Right then, so we've got to start off today by talking about Dominic Solanke. Now, this video probably would have featured him whether he'd done well or not in game week 10, but as it happens, he's finally broken what was a little bit of a duck for him. He's got 2 goals and an assist, so a pretty big mega haul in game week 10 against Aston Villa after 3 games in a row of less than 0.1 XG in each of those in the Premier League, and didn't really ever look like getting involved in anything in any of those games either. So a very frustrating time to own Dominic Solanke has finally come to an end. A lot of managers did sell him in game week 10, and honestly, that was perfectly understandable. 3 games with very low XG for a striker that is a lot more expensive than some of the other options that are doing very well. Obviously, Matheus Cunha, you've got Chris Wood there as well at much lower price. So it does make sense if you did sell him. However, he's obviously come back into full focus ahead of game week 11 now with Ipswich next up at home. If you still own Solanke, what you saw in game week 10 will be absolutely beautiful to you. I do still own him, and I'm really now looking forward to what he can do against Ipswich. And I think it just goes to show that things can turn around very quickly with elite level coaches, with very good players. If something isn't quite working, all it takes is a small tactical tweak or a couple of chances just to go your way, and these players can turn it around. So never fully lose faith in anyone. But it's easy to say that after he's just bagged a brace, one of which was an incredible dinked finish, by the way, as well. The data looked really good in game week 10. But as I've been saying for weeks now, with Solanke and with Spurs as well, it does feel like feast or famine every single week. You don't know which you're going to get. And I think especially with that centre forward spot for Spurs, they're going to maybe create a ton of chances for him in one game and absolutely nothing in another. And it will be all down to the type of opposition that they're playing against and the way that they think that they can best exploit that opposition. Now, Villa, obviously, it seemed like a very good matchup anyway. And now we're going into Ipswich at home. Again, it seems like a beautiful matchup for Spurs. They're probably going to be able to pin Ipswich back pretty well. And if that's the case, it means that Solanke's not going to get held up on the halfway line and creating those little half turns and putting players in behind him. He's going to be in and around the box for the cutbacks quite a lot. So I think if you've still got him, now it's kind of obvious to say after he's gotten three returns in one game, but he's definitely a hold for Ipswich now. I wouldn't even completely put anyone off of going and buying him ahead of that game if you really wanted to. Although I would say that after that, you've got Man City away, then you've got Chelsea in game week 15. 2 good games between those two, though. So you could absolutely say that it's a good little streak. But I was always looking at maybe getting rid of Solanke ahead of game week 12, or at least benching him in that week. So I think if you've got him, you absolutely hold him. I don't think he's a priority transfer in, but obviously it now looks a lot more comfortable holding on to Solanke after what was a very convincing performance. And I think we need to just remember this later on in the season when they go through other patches of not really creating many chances for Solanke. He's a feast or famine kind of player. The chances he does get are going to be very big, very high XG chances, but we might have to wait 70, 80 minutes into the match before he starts getting them in any given game. So patience has been rewarded for those of you who have kept hold of him. I don't think it was a bad transfer out this week either, but these things do rely a little bit on luck, a bit of variance, no matter what you want to call it. And finally, thankfully, he's done some points. So I can relax a little bit, hold him on for Ipswich, and fingers crossed, another good game week is just round the corner for Dominic Solanke. So we've talked about one striker in my team who's done very well this week. It's only fair that we balance out with another that I've kept hold of, kept the faith in, and just isn't looking himself at the moment, and that is Erling Haaland. Now, in the last 2 fixtures, the 2 matches in the Premier League, he's accumulated over 3 XG. I think it's something like 3.4 XG. So off that data, he would have been expected to get over 3 goals on average against Southampton and then obviously against Bournemouth as well. 2 of which against Southampton, 1 XG against Bournemouth. Now, there were a lot of big chances in the Bournemouth game as well, so it's not really a matter of whether or not City are creating chances for Haaland. He just isn't really finishing them at the moment. And a striker of his quality, you've got to expect that there's going to be an explosion sometime soon, some sort of turnaround. It's not a Dominic Solanke situation where he's not getting the chances and not getting the XG. It's players like this that I would say are much more encouraging to hold on to because they are getting the data, and historically he matches up to that underlying data really well. But I think it would be negligent of me to say that there's nothing wrong with Man City and Erling Haaland at the moment. 1 goal in 4 games in the Premier League in what was a very decent fixture run too, and now they're going into maybe a fixture run on paper that doesn't look quite so kind, including Brighton, Spurs, Liverpool, Forest. And Forest, by the way, you might kind of giggle a little bit at that being a tough fixture, but Forest's defensive numbers over the last season and a half now have been very, very strong, and they're 3rd in the league right now at time of recording. So they are a decent side, and Man City, whilst obviously they're probably the best side in the country right now, or at least in the top couple, they are really struggling to bury their chances, and something just isn't quite clicking at the moment. Now, Pep is a top quality coach. You'd imagine that turns around very, very soon. But with a player who's 15.3 million, can you afford to wait on that and hope that you're not carrying him for too many game weeks before he starts exploding again? Because again, at over 15 million, you don't just want a goal a game. You want explosions. You want 2 goals. You want hat-tricks. You want big, big hauls to make it worth holding on to him, because the alternatives, the opportunity cost is you could have a Palmer, Saka, Salah midfield if you didn't have Haaland. And there are also a lot of strikers who are almost 10 million less than him, who are burying chances regularly and scoring every other game week. Now, even if Haaland did score a goal a game at the moment, if you're not captaining him, which again, in the next 3 or 4 fixtures, there are plenty of good alternatives, is he worth the money? And I would probably say that overall, on the balance of things, if I was on a wild card, he's probably not worth the money anymore. And you can probably get more out of cheaper strikers with a more action-packed midfield of 3 premiums, or at least 2 premiums, and spread the funds elsewhere. That being said, we're not all on wildcard. I'm certainly not. And Brighton away as a matchup does look pretty good. Now, Brighton play that very high line. They're without Lewis Dunk yet again. And we saw it against Liverpool. We've seen it against Spurs earlier on in the season. They do get spun on the counter from that high line pretty regularly. And Haaland is one of the best in the business at taking advantage of those situations. So whilst he's frustrating, and whilst a lot of managers will probably fire sale him this week to make money for other moves, I think because Palmer has got a pretty tough fixture, obviously Saka in the same fixture as well, I think you can hold off if you really want to and just hold on to Haaland for another week and hope that it does turn around against Brighton. And then look, if he blanks again, that's 4 blanks in 5 weeks, 1 goal in 5 games, and then it really does make it a little bit clear that he's got to go fairly soon. But a player with this sort of data, and again, the XG per 90 is phenomenal. It's not like he's not getting the chances. I do have a gut feeling that it's going to turn very, very soon. It is just a matter of how long it's going to take. But I do like the matchups for the next 2 game weeks. It's just whether or not you can see something better to do with the money. And I think especially ahead of game week 12, even though that Spurs matchup is good, I think with Palmer playing Leicester and Saka also coming into a good run of fixtures, Salah playing Southampton, I think it is going to be very tempting to get rid of him. And it's something that I'm definitely eyeing up next week. Probably not this week, though. So we also have to talk about the Arsenal defence. And a lot of us have doubled up on Arsenal defence earlier on, around game week 6 on the wild card, perhaps. But a lot of us still have at least 1 defender, if not 2. Now, they've been incredibly frustrating yet again. A bit like Erling Haaland I've just talked about, Arsenal defence have been not really performing at the level that we expect from them in the last season or 2 under Arteta. However, what I would say is the data hasn't been all that bad. Now, the XGC per 90 is definitely regressing a little bit from last season, where it was, I think, about 0.75, which is absolutely elite level, by the way. But 1.07 still isn't terrible. It's just maybe a little bit down on what we're expecting. They've also had some pretty tough fixtures. They've got the last of their tough fixtures, or I suppose defensively difficult fixtures, in game week 11 against Chelsea. So it will be tempting to sell them ahead of that fixture. But round the corner now, they do have a good fixture swing. Nottingham Forest starts that off. Now, obviously, Chris Wood is in fantastic form. You might not see that as an easy game. But West Ham after that, Man United at home, Fulham after that. It's not a bad run, and that run extends beyond game week 15, by the way, as well. So I think if you've held on to Arsenal defence or David Raya in goal for this long, whilst it's been incredibly frustrating, I think we've kind of had all of the bad luck at once almost, and I would expect these numbers to improve, not game week 11, but soon after that. All of that being said, though, they're not cheap. 5.6 for Raya, over 6 million for Gabriel or for Saliba. You can definitely get good value out of defenders at 4.5 up to 5 million right now. I wouldn't put it past anyone to be getting rid of Arsenal defenders right now, especially if you don't think that this sort of data is going to improve when the fixtures turn. However, 0.39 expected clean sheets per 90 and over 3 saves per 90 for David Raya as well in particular. I don't think it's quite as bad as it maybe looks on paper right now. And I think that they are a good defence. It will come good eventually. It's just all about the patience. And look, if you've got spare free transfers, double Arsenal defence probably is quite heavy at the moment, especially with Chelsea to come. But I do still back them. I do still think that there are goals in the air for Gabriel or Saliba from set pieces. I think clean sheets will return fairly soon. And on balance, I think over the next 10 to 15 game weeks, they will be the defence to own. Just right now, we're in a bit of a drought for clean sheets for Arsenal, and they've been a bit unfortunate sometimes. But the data's not terrible, and I think if you've got them and you've got any other issues elsewhere, I would probably make peace with just holding on to them until the fixtures turn. And then if things don't improve when the fixtures turn, then absolutely you can get rid of them. You can get rid of them now if you want. I'm not in charge of your team, of course, but I've got double Arsenal defence. And I think on balance, I'm probably just going to cross my fingers, hold on to them until the fixtures turn, and hopefully the form returns fairly soon after that. Let's talk about a budget midfielder that will definitely be on the radar of a lot of FPL managers this week, especially with the fixtures to come, and that is Antoine Semenyo. Great season so far, 0.5 XGI per 90, 2/3 of that is expected goal threat as well, so very, very encouraging so far. And Bournemouth, just to talk about them as a team so far, they have been absolutely phenomenal. In fact, in the last 3 game weeks, they've beaten Arsenal, they've beaten Man City, and taken points off of Villa. They look like a really strong Premier League outfit right now. And with the fixtures to come, now they've gotten through what was a really difficult patch of fixtures, the next 5 or 6 looks absolutely phenomenal and ideally suited for attacking returns as well. Semenyo is all action. He's involved in absolutely everything Bournemouth do at the moment, and 5 attacking returns already after 10 game weeks is extremely good for someone who's only 5.6 million. Now, again, the data's good, but for someone who's that cheap, it's phenomenal. And you're not expecting 0.8, 0.9 XGI per 90 for someone who's a sub 6 million midfielder. What you're looking for is an attacking return every other game at best, and that can help kind of patch together the rest of your 11. If you can have yourself a 5.5 or 6 million midfielder who just sort of ticks along every other week, gets you an attacking return, you are absolutely laughing. And Semenyo right now, especially with the fixtures to come, looks exactly like that player to me, especially because a lot of it is goal threat. Now, again, looking at the fixtures in particular, Brentford, they are conceding a lot of goals right now. They're obviously a good side, but defensively, I would worry about their ability to keep clean sheets, and Semenyo could easily take advantage of that. Brighton at home, we've already spoken about their high line, the fact they'll probably be without Lewis Dunk as well. I'd again expect Bournemouth to do pretty well from an attacking point of view in that. Wolves really struggling right now defensively. Spurs are always good to concede a goal, and Ipswich after that. It is undoubtedly a fantastic run for Bournemouth assets. You could easily look at Evan Nilsson up front as well, or even maybe some of their defenders might be interesting to you with this run, but none of them will be as interesting to me as Antoine Semenyo. I just love the player quality. I think he's an elite performer. And at this price point, I think he's extremely good value for money for the next few fixtures, and he'd be high on my watch list if I didn't already own him right now. So when Pep Guardiola tells you that a player is unable to be benched because we just can't afford to bench him, what does that tell you? It should immediately raise red flags and say that he is going to get benched in the very next game. That's what we've seen from seasons gone past, and I fell for it yet again with Rico Lewis. Now, of course, after those sort of quotes, we should have known better. He was always going to get benched in game week 10, and I started him in my team. I thought, you know what, maybe Pep's being honest for once. But no, Kyle Walker comes back in a lot quicker than he was scheduled to, and Pep has been telling fibs to the media once again. Rico Lewis has been brilliant for Man City. He's been a very strong performer, one of their better players so far this season. But if Pep is saying that we would love to rest him, we just can't, maybe I should have listened to the subtext there, which is he's clearly tired and they will look for any excuse to rest him if at all possible. Now, obviously, he came off the bench, got a 1-pointer. That's not great for us this week. But what they were doing is chasing the game when he came on. So again, it does show that he is an important player for them, and they do trust him to try and make a difference and to turn the game around when they need him. They probably assume that Bournemouth could be got at, that they might not even need to rely on him, and therefore they could use that game as a rest for Lewis. But to me, I think the performance against Bournemouth has really shot something into Man City, and they're going to wake up now. And Lewis especially, I think, has just been so good that I just would struggle to see how he's benched that often moving forwards. Now, he will always get rotated at times. Almost every single Man City player, barring Erling Haaland, does so at times. But he has been important to them. And at 4.9 million, he is still good value for money. So I think if you're looking at selling him because you think that he's now a rotation issue and he's going to regularly be on the Man City bench, then that's fair enough. He might be. But my take on it would be is he's just quite tired and he will probably come back into the starting lineup pretty soon, if not straight away. And it's more of a question for me whether or not I back Man City defensively more than anything else to actually keep any clean sheets in the next few fixtures. Brighton, Spurs, Liverpool, I think on balance, I expect all three of those clubs to get a goal against Man City, especially with the way that they're defending at the moment. They've just seemed to be getting caught on the break way too often. And without Rodri there, they've got Kovacic playing there alongside Gundogan quite a lot. And both of them have that forward-thinking mentality where they're not happy to just sit back in or marshal the defence. And I think that that does mean that, especially when the fullbacks are also bombing forwards, Gvardiol and Lewis quite often, it does leave them quite exposed at the back. So I do think they concede in most games now. Brighton, Spurs, Liverpool, good attacks all round. So again, I do expect goals there. And even Nottingham Forest after that, even at home, Chris Wood's been great. So you could easily see Nottingham Forest scoring in that game as well. So it's not necessarily an issue, I think, that Lewis is going to be regularly on the bench. It's more that I just can't see where the next clean sheet is really coming from right now. And even at 4.9, even if that's good value on paper, if I don't think Man City are keeping clean sheets, then I probably do need to have him down as a bit of an issue in my side. It's just whether or not he's enough of an issue to use my one free transfer on. And I think at this moment in time, I think there are other more major issues in most of our sides that means that Lewis probably just gets a bit of a stay of execution, especially considering that attacking data isn't all that bad. So who knows? You might get lucky. You might get an attacking return out of him if you do start him. But look, there's always a rotation risk. I would say that he should be in their best starting 11 more often than not. But if the clean sheets aren't there and he doesn't pick up on the attacking returns, then he's going to be a sell pretty quickly for me. If not, maybe this week, probably in the next few. So we're now going to talk about the third and final striker that I own in my team this week, and the one that I am most disappointed with and most likely to sell ahead of game week 11. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been, I think, probably the worst FPL transfer or signing I've made in at least 2 or 3 years, probably even further back than that. He has been absolutely horrendous since I picked him up on a game week 6 wildcard. And you'll hear a lot of content creators talking about all the things they do right, but I think it's only fair that you have to be balanced and talk about the mistakes you make as well. And Calvert-Lewin was just such a poor mistake and error in judgment in game week 6. I really thought that we were seeing the start of a bit of a rejuvenation for him. It just has not happened. And especially when some of the forwards that have been at 6 million or cheaper have done really, really well in the last 3 or 4 game weeks, this transfer or pickup on a wild card has been really, really punishing for me. No goals, no assists. Everything he's done so far was before I transferred him in. In fact, one offside goal, I think it was last week, was about as close as I got to any attacking returns for Calvert-Lewin. And in the last couple of game weeks, he's been subbed off earlier and earlier for Beto, who has looked very, very good. So obviously got the equaliser last week, hit the post or hit the bar against Southampton before having a goal ruled out for a very, very marginal offside call. I would be pretty surprised now if Calvert-Lewin started against West Ham, which is obviously a good fixture. I was hoping that I could hold on to Calvert-Lewin through all the way to game week 14, perhaps, against Wolves, and then bin him after that. But he's been so poor that I think I'm going to have to shift up that transfer in my priorities and look for someone that can come in and do the job that Calvert-Lewin just clearly isn't up to at the moment. He's missing everything. He's been a bit unfortunate at times, but because he's just not got that confidence at the moment, it just makes it more and more likely that he's going to hash at chances. He's not going to get good connection on things. He's not making the runs as often anymore. And Beto, playing well off the bench, is going to put him under more pressure. And I think it is only a matter of time now until he comes out of the lineup for a couple of game weeks, just until he gets his head right more than anything else. Now, the data is not even that bad. It's not great, but it's definitely not that bad. I just think on balance, I would be surprised now if Dyche persists with him in the starting lineup, considering what Beto does offer. Now, look, the fixtures are great, but if I don't think he starts, he's got to be a sell. 5% ownership, so not many of you out there will still hold on to him, other than maybe some hardcore Calvert-Lewin fans. But even I have tried to be as patient as possible on him, thinking that he's only a 6 million striker, things will come good eventually. I have now lost faith, and I think I need to make a move to just get rid of him and freshen up my forward line, because I just can't see where the goals are coming for him right now. And especially if he loses his place, that's a major, major issue in my side. Now, if I am looking at making a transfer in my forward line this week, the one player that I would be really encouraged by is Matheus Cunha. Performed well again, didn't really do all that much on the ball against Crystal Palace, and yet got the assist and picked up the bonus point just basically from doing that. Now, because he's so creative, because his baseline bonus is so high, he doesn't really need to pick up that many attacking returns in order to also get bonus points. So that is a huge feather in his cap, especially because Wolves don't necessarily score that many goals, or at least you wouldn't expect them to. If Cunha is involved in, let's say, 50% of their goals and they score 1 or 2 a week, then we're looking at probably 2 or 3 bonus points every single time he gets a return. And so the goals he scores, the assists he gets, aren't 3-point assists or 4-point goals. They're more like 5 or 6-point goals and 4-point, maybe even 5-point assists, which is incredibly valuable for a player that is this cheap. Now, there are cheaper strikers out there that I do like the look of, and even Strand Larsen in the same team might not be the worst shout. But I think the routes to points that Cunha offers, considering he's on set pieces, he's very involved in every attack that Wolves have, I do expect him to be good value for money and a really good differential pickup over the next few. Now, again, the data so far this season, I talked about it last week, isn't the best, but it's also not bad either. It's just under 0.5 XGI per 90. And again, they've had some really tough games. To come, they've got Southampton at home, Fulham away, Bournemouth at home, Everton away, West Ham away. All teams, maybe bar Bournemouth, who have been good, all teams that can definitely be got at by Wolves. And even if you think Wolves lose 3 or 4 out of the next 5 games, I think it's still reasonable to suggest that they score in most, if not all, of those games. And again, Cunha being as talismanic as he is, you'd expect, I would say, 3 or 4 attacking returns from this batch. By the way, the fixture run does continue after game week 15 all the way through to game week 20 as well. So he's a good long-term hold. And I do think that he's going to be one of the better strikers to own over this next 9 or 10 game week period. It's just whether or not you can easily get to him this week. If you're looking at selling Erling Haaland, obviously it's very easy to do so. Most managers, if you've still got Solanke, if you've got Jackson, Havertz, or even Watkins, you might not want to sell them just yet. That's completely fair. But if you are looking at bringing in a striker this week, I would actually probably still put Cunha ahead of Chris Wood. As crazy as that sounds, and as good as Wood has been, I think we're now looking at a fixture turn for Nottingham Forest where I still expect him to score goals. I do back Cunha to maybe get a couple more and the bonus points to go with it, especially because he's got a bit more assist threat as well, over the next stretch of fixtures. And we're always looking for the next haul. We're never looking for the last one. We want the next one. And I think Cunha has a good chance of being the next standout pick in the forward line that we're all going to want to jump towards. Now, to wrap up today's video, I wanted to talk about a player who was incredibly popular at the start of the season. Ahead of game week 1, there weren't many teams going without Alexander Isak. However, he's completely dropped off the face of the earth in terms of FPL ownership, down to 12% now. I think it was something like 50 or 60% at the start of the season. So has really come down and also got a couple of price drops there as well. Now, partly that was down to the injury that took him out of action for a couple of game weeks, but also because he just quite simply wasn't getting the attacking returns or even the data up until this point. However, there's no doubt about it. He's definitely back up and running now. Took his goal against Arsenal absolutely excellently. Obviously, the cross in from Gordon was phenomenal, but he also took the finish really, really well. And that's a couple of goals in a couple of games now. The data's improving week on week. And I do get the feeling that he's going to be a player that we're going to be very interested in again, if not now, right round the corner very, very soon. Now, of course, the XG per 90 is the most important stat that we look at with a striker, 0.49 for Isak, and that is actually maybe a little bit down on what we expect from him over the last few seasons. But I think that goes to show that Newcastle at the start of the year were maybe taking a little bit of time to get up to full speed. They certainly looked like their most intense and aggressive best. Against Arsenal, they were absolutely phenomenal, pressing them hard, not giving them any time on the ball, and Isak did lead the line very well there as well. So if Newcastle are once again fully functional, I think Isak is also going to benefit from that. He's going to get higher XG chances more regularly, and with the fixtures coming, I think from game week 12 onwards, he will be an excellent buy. And I'm definitely considering getting rid of Haaland to bring in Palmer as a double swap. But as part of that double swap, maybe looking at Alexander Isak in my forward line, who will then go into a very decent run of fixtures. West Ham at home, who are really struggling at the moment. I can see them being absolutely torn apart by Newcastle's intensity. Then Crystal Palace, Liverpool, Brentford, and the run goes on after that as well. So I do think that Isak, whilst he hasn't really been a factor, and whilst obviously a lot of managers have sold him, that could be an opportunity at a cut price 8.3 million. I think he's going to be good value for money, on penalties, likely to get 90 minutes. He's proved his fitness over a long period of time now, and it was only the broken toe that really took him out of action. That's not going to be a recurring thing. So I do expect him to be a serious factor in the next few game weeks. So definitely want to keep an eye on there. Now, in the meantime, if you've enjoyed today's video, please do feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It would be really greatly appreciated. And of course, if there are any players that you'd like to talk about in the comments below, do feel free to leave a little note and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Meanwhile, I'll see you later this week as we start preparing for the Game Week 11 team selection.